Hey guys, this video we want to introduce or to talk about the concept of selling call options, right? So this can actually be a fast free way to earn some passive income, right? Or we call this premiums, while we hold on to some stocks, right? And this could actually require less active monitoring, right? But of course, depending on the way that we trade this, right, it may or may not require some active monitoring, right? But in that case, it's I would say it's quite a simple strategy to use, right, to gain some extra profits. Okay, so first off, right, we say that for selling call options, right, so call options these are contracts, right, that actually allow the buyer to have the right to buy 100 shares of specific stocks, right, a specific price by a certain expiration date. Okay, so if you look at that, if you zoom into specifically selling call options, right, then what it means here is the person selling this contract, right, they are obligated to sell 100 shares of the stock or the ETF, right, at a certain strike price, right, by a certain date itself, okay, or the expiration date, right. So by selling the contract, we are actually creating an obligation on ourselves, right, until the position is closed, right. That means we buy back the contract, right, to neutralize this position in our portfolio so that there is no more of such obligation. Okay, so in this case, broadly, when we sell call options, right, we are looking at two pathways that we can do, right? So both are involving selling call options, right? However, between a covered call and a naked call, right? So these two ways of doing it is that for a covered call, the idea of covered means that there is something to cover this position, right? So what it means here is we actually do have the 100 shares in our account to sell if needed, right? So simply because when we sell a call option, right, we are creating the obligation to sell 100 shares, right? That's our promise to the buyer of the contract. And now, because we do have the 100 shares, right, we are able to honor our obligation if the need arises. Okay, so there may or may not be any need, but if it does arise, right, we are able to sell the shares. So there's no issue here. However, with the case of a naked call, right, then the problem is we actually do not have the shares ready to sell, right? So we create the promise, but we are actually unable to honor it, right? Suppose the day comes for us to sell that 100 shares. Okay, so that is the main difference over here, right? So if the cover, if you look at the covered call, right? So in that case, not only are we prepared to sell, right? We also should have the shares ready. So these are the two criteria to look at, right? So if you're using a covered call method, right, or strategy, then you have to have the shares, right? And not only are you using your shares as sort of like a guarantee, right, or sort of like a promise, right, to sell the shares, you should also be mentally prepared to actually sell them, right? Because it could come to the case where, because more often than not, when we are selling options, right, we are going for the premiums, right? So depending on how long the contract is, right, we could be selling a same week expiration, next week expiration, and so on. We could also be selling a strike price, right, that's very in the money or that's very out the money, right? So it depends on all these factors to see how much premiums we're collecting. But more or less, because we are selling, generally when we are selling, we are after the premiums, right? So uh, the sellers may actually not want to sell the shares, even if they do have, right? And they just want to get the premium. So if we are actually doing a covered call and we have no intention, then it could be a bit dangerous. So, right, in that case, it would lean towards more of a naked call situation, right, that we have to monitor more actively later on. Okay, so let's say in the case here, right, if we back to our cover call situation, right, so what happens here is that once you sell the contract and as the days go by, right, it's nearing expiration, then we could see one scenario happening, and that is that your actual stock price is way below the strike price. Okay, so the actual stock price is way below the strike price, right? So for example, here actual price is 90, our strike price is 100, right? So the actual price is 90 and our strike price is 100. So what happens here is that we are promising to sell our shares. And let's say from the buyer side, right? So they could choose to buy the shares, right, at $90, which is the current market price. They could also choose to buy from us, right, at $100 each. Okay, so in that case, if you are the buyer, right, would you want to buy the shares at $90 in the market or $100 through the contract, right, which is a higher price? So probably you will want actual market, right? So in that case, they are not going to get us to buy or get us to sell them the shares, right, at $100 each because that's going to be a higher price that they pay at, right, or that they pay. So here in this situation, it will be good for the sellers because the contract, right, will probably be worth very little now. And we, as the sellers, right, are able to keep most of the premiums because the buyer is not going to use this contract, right? Because they are not able to buy at a discount the shares at using the contract, right? But instead, we are just collecting the premium. So that could be one of the better scenarios for the seller of the contract, right? However, if you are facing scenario B, right, then what happens here is the strike price is actually lower. Okay, so the strike price is actually lower. So what happens is now we reverse the situation. If we were to buy in the open market, right, in the stock market, the buyers of the contract, they can buy over the shares at $100, right? They can buy over at $100 each. However, if they were to use the call option that they bought, right, and get us, the sellers of the contract, to sell to them 100 shares at $90 each, then they are almost going to profit. They are going to profit immediately, right? Because they can buy at $90 while the market is already selling at $100. So in that case, they are going to get us to sell to them, right? So that will be the case. That'll be one thing. Second of all, when we sold the call option, right, we would have collected a certain amount of premium, right? And now that the stock has actually gone up and it is worth more, right, than before, the call option is also going to be more expensive, right? Because how call options work is going to be more higher in value or higher in price as the underlying stock is increasing in its price. So then now if we want to actually buy back the contract, right? Because we have sold a contract as the seller and we got the premium from the start. But if we want to switch off or if you want to close this position, right? And if we want to actually neutralize this obligation, then we actually have to buy back this call option. But we will have to do so at a higher price. That means it could be the case where we collected $200 of premium at the start. And now we have to pay $500 to buy this contract to neutralize the position. So we actually have a loss of $300, right, for this trade. Alternatively, right, suppose we do have the shares, then we could actually just sell off the shares and we just have no more shares. Okay, so this is the case with covered call because we can just sell over the shares and suppose we did buy the shares at a much lower price, right? Then even if we sell now at the strike price of 90 instead of 100, we could still pocket some profits, right? We are just not selling at such a high price, but we still did make some profits from selling the shares. Okay, so that will be the case with selling the call option, covered call, right? So whatever happens here, you may not need to monitor so much, right? It's either the case where the contract just becomes zero on expiration, you pocket the premium, or eventually you may need to sell the shares, right? But because you do have the shares, then it doesn't matter that much, right? Whether or not you are selling in the end. Okay, now if you were to contrast this with the case of a naked call, right, that means we actually do not have the 100 shares to sell. So like just now, right, we could have scenario A where the actual price is very low, right, lower than our strike price. We will simply just keep the premium. Okay, so this is the optimal situation, right, if you are selling a naked call. Right. However, in the difference, right, with the covered call is we actually don't have the shares to sell, right? So that in this case, suppose now on expiration, for example, and we find that the actual price has actually gotten way higher than the strike price, then we simply cannot afford to just let the contract expire and sell the shares that we don't have, right, then it becomes the case that we will be short selling 100 shares, right? Because our portfolio doesn't have the 100 shares to sell. So if the broker just sells for you, then you're actually just doing a short selling, right? So then if the shares actually continue to rise, then you are facing unlimited losses. Okay, so in that case, it may be wiser for us to just close this position, right? Don't come to the point where we have to sell 100 shares that we don't already own. Okay, so with a nickel call, because we want to ensure that we are not selling 100 shares, right, that we don't have. So you may need to monitor more actively, right? So to make sure that suppose now the stock price is rising non-stop, right? Then you may want to put a stop to this, and you actually do a stop loss, right, on your sell call position, so that you don't allow the calls to actually keep accumulating more losses, right, until the point where you have to make more losses, or even have to sell the 100 shares that you don't own. Okay, so this video is just to roughly explain about the difference between naked call and a covered call option, right? If you're selling call option. So if you guys are interested in more, right, of how we look at different aspects of option trading, right, other strategies, and not just about selling options, then feel free to check out the link below, right, for our training membership. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next video.